Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm 17, where we read the prayer of a righteous man. We begin, notice the superscription says, a prayer of David, uh, Tefillah le David. That Tefillah, the opening term, the Tefillah, that's actually the word, the plural is the word for the Psalms. It's one of the titles for the Psalms, the prayers. But this is a prayer of David. Now, this is the first time this particular superscription has been used. We've seen praises, we've seen other sorts of things described. This is the first time we've seen this particular superscription, the Tefillah, the prayer of David. And now we launch into the prayer. Hear a just cause, O Lord. Give heed to my cry. Give ear. Notice the repeated supplications. Give ear to my prayer, which is not from deceitful lips. But in that, David speaks of hear my just cause, O Lord. Um, Again, when we get to give ear to my prayer, which is not from deceitful lips. So this is the idea of a righteous heart that David is presenting. He's going to speak more about this in a bit. Let my judgment come forth from your presence. Let your eyes look with equity, with fairness. David is praying for God to be fair toward him. Now, let me just say, I don't always pray that way. Sometimes I pray, Lord, be gracious toward me, because I, if I got fairness, if I got what I deserved, I might be in trouble. But David feels confident, even though he recognizes, yes, he's a fallen man. Yes, there's bad things he's done in the past, and probably will do in the future. But he sees, at least in this instance, his cause is just. He is telling the truth. He's asking God to judge in fairness. And so this is the plea for God to hear. We come to verse 3. You have tried my heart. You have visited me by night. Notice the by night. We're going to talk about that a bit later. You have tested me and you find nothing. I have purposed that my mouth will not transgress. And so notice, you tested me. You looked as the judge, God, you looked and you didn't find anything wrong. That's the idea here. My mouth will not transgress. I've spoken rightly. I've been doing rightly, at least in this manner, in this area. As for the deeds of men, by the word of your lips, I have kept from the paths of the violent. My steps have held fast to your paths. My feet have not slipped. And so he says, Lord, you judge. And if you judge, you'll see that I've been doing it right. And so he protests his innocence, at least in the manner for which he is being perhaps falsely accused and maybe attacked by others. He is saying, Lord, do right by me in this instance. Verse 6, I have called upon you. Now, what he's going to do, he's going to continue that invocation. I have called upon you, for you will answer me, O God. He actually is assured that God's going to answer. So I have called upon you. Incline your ear to me. Hear my speech. So he's calling for God to listen, to hear, to wondrously show your loving kindness. Remember that word, loving kindness. The chesed. We've defined that as loyalty. Show your loyalty, your loyal love, O Savior of those who take refuge at your right hand, for those who raise up, or from those who raise up, and then the translators uh, inserted the words against them. I think that's the idea. There are those who are rising up, those who are in opposition, and David is asking for God to intervene in those instances. Verse 8, keep me as the notice, keep me as the apple of the eye. He's going to say, hide me in the shadow of your wings from the wicked who despoil me, my deadly enemies who surround me. So here, if we hadn't gotten it before, now we got the opposition, the disloyal opposition that is coming against him. Notice that phrase, as the apple of the eye. We want to pause and look at that. The Hebrew has the idea of ke'ishon bat an. So ke'ishon, the ke part is as the little man, or sometimes we say the pupil, like the pupil of the eye. But that was an expression itself. Ish is just the word for a man, masculine. Like when God created Adam and the woman, he created him Ish and Isha, man and woman. Um, and so here, this Ish, and notice, as a little one, as a little man, that's a figure of speech to describe that little part of the eye, like the pupil, the place where you, maybe if you look and you might see a little image of yourself. I think that might be the idea. But instead of the normal figure of speech, where we say Ishon ayin, it's not that. There's an intervening word, Keishon bat, and the word bat is daughter. And that's unusual. It's slipped into this figure of speech. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just unusual, at least throughout the Old Testament. And then, of course, ayin is the word for eye. So the little man of the eye is what we expect to read, but this is the little man of the daughter of the eye. And I'm not entirely sure what the significance is. I can't help but think maybe there's a touch of tenderness in the way this is being described. Now, we have an English expression, the apple of the eye. That's your favored one. And I think that's a good translation, not word for word, but just the idea. Remember, the idea of the eye is there, but just the idea of that one who's favored and special and protected. And of course, I don't know about you, I like to protect my eyes. You know, if something's flying around, I try to cover my eyes and not let garbage go into that. So keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings. This is another figure of speech. And remember that wings were both, of a bird. That's what you naturally think of, but also it had become a figure of speech in that the clothes that you wore, the robe that you wore, the ends of the robe were known as your wings. And so you have the bird idea, but it's not just the bird idea, but it's that picture. Think about the times you've seen maybe a chicken, or any, really, it's not just a chicken, any bird that takes the little ones and hides them under their wings. And that's the picture, that God is the one with his wings outstretched and hiding those under his wings. Remember how Jesus um, spoke to the city of Jerusalem, 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 how often I wanted to gather you to me together, like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you would not come. And he's mourning over the city. Well, notice, keep me, and then the opposition is mentioned in verse 9, from the wicked who despoil me, my deadly enemies who surround me. So you have the wicked, the enemies. That's parallelism. Is saying the same thing. His enemies are the wicked ones. The wicked ones are his enemies because they're against God. And notice they're trying to despoil. They're trying to surround him. They're trying to take him down. Verse 10, they have, and the they is the enemies, they have closed their unfeeling heart. Heart is actually inserted by the translators, but they're unfeeling, and you sort of get what it is they're not feeling. With their mouth, they speak proudly. So not only in what they're thinking on the inside, but what they're saying on the outside. They have now, notice, they speak proudly. They have now surrounded us in our steps. They set their eyes to cast us down to the ground. Notice we had the apple of your eye, or the little man of your eye, or little tender one of your eye, but now they have set their eyes to cast us down to the ground. And we go on to verse 12. He is still talking about the same enemies. He is like a lion that is eager to tear. And notice this is all describing the way of the unrighteous, the way of David's enemy, the way of the one who's against God, being described, notice, as a lion and as a young lion lurking in hiding places, that is, eager to tear, eager to pounce upon its prey. Verse 13, David is now making his request for deliverance, and he does this with four verbs: arise, O Lord, confront him, bring him low, deliver my soul. And of course, he still has that wicked one involved. Deliver my soul from the wicked with your sword, from men with your hand, O Lord, from men of the world whose portion is in this life. That is, they're only interested in this life. They're not interested in what you have in your realm. They only want what they can get here and now. From men of this world whose portion is in this life and whose belly you will fill with your treasure, they are satisfied with children and leave their abundance to their babes. That is, they're just getting for their own posterity, but not for spiritual posterity, not for the Lord's people. Finally, we come to verse 15. As for me, I shall behold your face in righteousness. And then another way of saying that, I will be satisfied with your likeness when I awake. Now, remember, we had that reference to in the night. And so here again is just maybe a hint that we're supposed to be thinking of this in the night, in the darkest night, in the deep dark of night, in the darkness of David's soul. Um, as he speaks about when I awake, you remember back in verse 3, you have visited me by night. And so I think that might be an idea, but maybe there's an idea beyond this, beyond just maybe a psalm that takes place in the night, but in the sense of a spiritual and, in a sense, even a physical awakening. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 14 says, for this reason, it says, and he actually is quoting from the Old Testament. Now, is he quoting here from Psalm 17 or from Isaiah? There's a couple of chapters, 51 and 52. And maybe it's both at the same time. Awake, sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ, that is the Messiah, will shine on you. And this is a reminder that both we have become spiritually awake as we've come to Christ, but there's also coming a day. There's also coming a day when we shall, if Christ hasn't returned yet, when we shall sleep, but we shall also be awakened. And First John chapter 3 verse 2 speaks of to Christians, beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we shall be. We know that when he appears, we shall be like him because we shall see him. Notice, I shall behold your face in righteousness. We shall see him just as he is. And when we see him, we will be satisfied, not just because we see his likeness, but 1 John 3:2 says, as we see him, we will be like him when we awake.